you guys all have been playing for a little bit of time, so we're not going to talk too much of like too many beginner type stuff, because I do run a lot of clinics where players are looking for grip or they're looking at different things like that. If you guys have some more basic general questions, just feel free to ask it. Feel free to just raise your hand and say, can you talk about that, or can you explain it, or whatever it is. We'll go through grip just pretty quick. My grip that I use is called a power grip. A lot of the pros on tour use something that is very similar to this type of grip for distance. I use this grip on mid-ranges, putters, drivers. I've used this grip since I was 13 or 14. I've never really changed my grip too much. The thing with power grip that you want to make sure that you do not do if you're ever trying this out is, I see a lot of people who try to make basically like a fist, like this. You just want to make sure that your fingers are a little bit more slanted, and try not to tuck this pointer finger right here. You really want to kind of lay it on the outside. Some of the other grips that some of the top pros use is kind of like a stacked grip, to where they keep their fingers straight down right there, but they're having that pressure to where they kind of squeeze the back end of the disc, and they just once again kind of barely tuck that pointer finger. You're not going to find a whole lot of pros that tuck that front finger right there, if anything. Outside of this power grip, I use what's called a fan grip, and it's exactly what it is. In definition is you fan your fingers out towards the center of the disc, and this is designed to get the disc out of your hand really nice and easy, because all you have to do is open your hand. And so the power grip, you're going to be able to squeeze down and kind of engage your forearm muscles a lot more. So the thumb pressure on top is really important whenever it comes to throwing shots. The thumb pressure, in my opinion, is something that a lot of people lose out on because they don't realize how it controls the nose angle of the disc. We got some people coming up here, so I'll wait for just a second. But does that make sense on the grip right there for everybody?
Your thumb isn't over that.
No, my thumb's not necessarily over anything. And when you're talking about fan grip also, my fingers are actually underneath right here. So I'm still kind of, they're working together to hold the center of the disc. And the power grip is kind of squeezing along the rim, or the biggest part about the disc, and that's kind of where you can use all of your forearm muscles, and you're engaging a lot more there. Does that make sense?
I see when people like the big arms throwing, I see their thumbs really pretty far away from the head.
Yeah, and I've never had any success putting my thumb out here. I always think that your thumb has to get off the top of the disc. To some extent, it does have to get itself off the top of the disc, and also your thumb needs to control the front edge. So anywhere where the disc is coming out is going to be the nose angle of your release. And you want to make sure that that's almost fairly flat. A lot of people think nose down is this, but a disc is not going to fly nose down this way. You just want to keep it almost like a line drive in baseball is the best example. Line drive versus a home run. It's all about kind of keeping it fairly low and keeping that nose angle slightly up, but not enough to where the wind gets underneath and it shoots straight up. Because the first beginner mistake I would say is we all tried to play and we threw it like a frisbee and it goes straight up into the air and goes to the left. Everybody bought the fastest disc that they could find whenever they went to the store. But that thumb's really going to help dictate that nose angle, because you can squeeze down on the front of the disc right there. But if your thumb is more towards the center, it's really hard to control the nose angle. And if your thumb's towards the edge, you don't really have control over how the disc is kind of being pushed down either. Does that make sense? I also see a lot of people slip their thumb off whenever their thumb is too close to the edge. Yeah. But with fan grip, which is just a really good way to work on shorter shots. So like anything 250 or below, I'll probably end up throwing a fan grip. But it's just designed to be able to tilt the release angle that you want in your hand and use your wrist to kind of put a little bit of spin on it, and then open your hand towards the target.
Does your pinky making contact on your finger?
For me, I don't know if it's just my specific grip or my hand, but my two middle fingers here are a little bit more center, which makes it a little bit harder for the pinky to have any pressure. Same thing for the pointer finger. For people who think it feels like it slips out of their hand, I actually suggest that the pointer finger here and the thumb kind of pinch and hold on to that side right there. Not necessarily is it going to be on front, it's just going to be kind of on the edge, but you can squeeze right there to hold on to the disc. Does that make sense? It works a little bit better if you have a putter instead of a driver, but it's easy to kind of squeeze right there to give you a little bit more pressure. But these are the contact points that you want to have the pressure behind it. And that's kind of where you have different release angles coming through. Like that. And of course, if I'm looking to throw like a little bit of a hyzer, I just kind of change the angle in my hand and then come through. But that grip's not really designed to throw too hard. It's really all about opening up your hand and having a nice smooth follow through. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Any questions on grip in general?
Okay, yeah, obviously with you know, your putter and your driver, your thickest rim driver is going to be different, so it does affect the grip a little bit.
Yes.
You want to show us on a fat driver? How
Yeah.
your power grip?
Yeah. So this is a X1, which is a distance driver. My grip on a power grip looks fairly close to the same. I don't usually fan grip anything outside of a putter. Every now and then I'll fan grip a mid-range if it calls for something to kind of fade a little bit harder at the end. But my grip on that is still going to be very similar. As you can see, my thumb is always on the outside edge of the hard part of the disc. So that's something to really think about, because this is a bigger rim and my thumb is still on the outside edge, so I can squeeze down and make sure that that front of the disc is going to stay nice and low whenever I release it. What was your question on it?
My question is, if you're throwing like a mid-range or even a fairway driver, so I had to change my grip to fan grip because I kept just burning them off into the ground. So how do you power grip a mid-range or fairway driver and have it not just burn into the ground?
Yeah, and one of those things, in my opinion, that kind of sounds more like wrist. A lot of people, the thumb is going to dictate which way the wrist goes, and that's kind of the next thing that goes with grip is going to be your wrist position and how it's used to put spin and power on the disc. So the best example that I like to use for that is you want to use your wrist how a door hinges instead of rotating it over. And a lot of people kind of build the wrong muscle memory if they have a disc that's too overstable for them, because they're used to coming here and rotating it over so the disc will fly to the right and then come back to the left, especially if it's a driver and they're having low arm speed behind the disc. What you want to have is basically to where it works back and forward right here to put the most amount of efficient spin behind the disc. So if you're talking about the disc is pulling over into the ground and pulling over to the ground, I would think that you're actually rotating your wrist over that way, instead of having your wrist almost follow the line of trajectory that you want.
So it's not a grip issue, it's more of a...
It could be follow through, and it could be wrist issue is what I think it is, because the wrist kind of gives your body a way to follow through, and that's kind of something that we'll get into right here in a minute.
So like you hear people say like put it like in the crease right there, but I
Yeah.
feel like when I do that, it's more of an effort to hang on to the disc.
Uh-huh.
I feel like there's not as much pressure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I don't put my disc in my crease. And some people talk about lining it up with the center of their forearm and bringing it down to where it's like perfectly lined up. But I actually line it up, it's almost on the bottom of my arm right there. And you can see like there's a hole where my thumb is. Like I'm actually squeezing down on top right there. You can see my wrist muscles right here flexing whenever I'm squeezing. Mm-hmm. And so there's not necessarily anything lined up right there. I don't think that has too much meaning. I don't think it's going to help you like line up or throw shots any better. Grip is all about being comfortable. Number one, first and foremost, like we all have different sized hands and different muscles in our hands. There's some things that you probably don't want to do, and there's some things that the top pros have done for years that's always going to be a consistent thing to go off of. But you should also kind of take that and do your own thing, and then that's kind of going to turn into your own grip. Yeah. But I wouldn't say that lining up the disc like in your hand or anything is going to help you throw further or be more accurate. You got to be comfortable. And if you're having release issues like too early, too late or something, then I would switch it up a little bit. And then also just don't worry about it too much. You got to feel comfortable, and then you're going to feel a lot more confident. Yeah. Any more questions on that?
About the forehand grip.
Yeah, and forehand too is once we go through backhand, we'll talk about forehand at the very end. But with forehand grip, we can just talk about it real quick. Is there's kind of 2 or 3, I would say, forehand grips that I see a lot of pros use, and the main one being basically a stacked grip, which is your middle finger, the pad of your finger being on the inside 45-degree angle where it goes from the flight plate to the rim of the disc, and you want to make sure the disc is located in your hand the right way, that your wrist is not coming over like you're throwing a baseball. You want to use, once again, your wrist like a door hinging, which is just going to go from forward to back right there. And that's something that where grip is going to be important, because you have to set yourself up to use your wrist in the most efficient way. Any more questions on that?